Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's Junior Landcare webinar about supporting student well-being through outdoor learning projects. My name is Trish O'Gorman, and I am a partnerships manager with Landcare Australia's Junior Landcare program. Firstly, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands that we sit on today. I'm joining you from the beautiful Ghana country in South Australia, and I would like to acknowledge elders past, present, and emerging. I know I just got a note here to say we've still got people joining, so I might just pause here for a second. You can let me know when we're good to go, Di. Okay, great. I'll kick off again. I'm delighted to welcome our two presenters for today's session. Some of you who've been at Junior Landcare webinars before will undoubtedly recognise Sam Harrison, who's joining us from Victoria. And I'm delighted to also welcome Dr Chloe Watfern from the Black Dog Institute today. Before I throw to Chloe and Sam to introduce themselves, I'd just like to draw your attention to the Q&A box that you should see. If any questions pop into your head while Chloe and Sam are talking today, please feel free to add them into the question and answer box, and we'll leave as much time as possible at the end to respond to as many questions as we can. So over to you, Chloe.
Hi, thanks so much for having me today. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm joining from Woolgoorukaba country, whose sovereignty was never ceded, on Yunbanun in Magnetic Island, North Queensland. But I am based at the Black Dog Institute, whose headquarters are on Gadigal and Bidjigal land in Randwick, New South Wales, and I'm a postdoctoral fellow there, part of the Arts-Based Knowledge Translation Lab. So we're a team who use art in the research process to understand all kinds of mental health conditions and well-being. And we also use art to support the mental health and well-being of communities. So, for example, one project I work on is called Culture Dose for Kids, and that is being rolled out across regional galleries in New South Wales. And it's a really open-ended, process-driven art program for kids and their parents to support them with anxiety. But my predominant research focus is on the intersections between the environment and mental health and well-being, particularly for young people. And that's often in the context of climate change and ecological crisis. So some of the distress that we might feel about the environment, but also the positive things that come from being in nature and really connecting with nature. So I'm excited to talk about some of that research with you later today. Thanks.
And I'm Sam Harrison. I'm coming to you from Wurundjeri land in Victoria here. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging as well too. I'm coming to this from the perspective of a teacher and as a junior Landcare facilitator as well too. My interest is in running environmental programs and linking it to the science curriculum, and also exploring how being in nature can help enhance well-being. It can help enhance our understanding of our place in the world as well too. I'm also supported by a couple of little caterpillar friends as well too, who I'll be talking a little bit about more later on when we talk about some of our projects as well too. Maybe just while we're having a think about how we are in nature, it'd be really nice maybe in the Q&A just to pop a bit of an observation how you feel about being in nature, or maybe how you're experiencing nature around you as well. So I'm quite lucky. I live on very close to the Maribyrnong River, which is actually a Wurundjeri word, means I can hear a ringtail possum, and I can see the trees outside and they're blowing in the wind, and I can smell the flowers and the mint and the plants that I've got here. So I'm feeling quite connected to nature right now, even though I'm in the city. So feel free to pop that in the Q&A about how you're feeling, and we'll try and maybe have a little look later on about how you being in nature helps you feel.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Chloe. That's great. Yeah, I live quite close to the beach in Adelaide, so I get to enjoy that on a daily basis, which is amazing. and looking out my window here, looking at some huge trees that our house backs onto. So I'm very lucky to be immersed in nature all the time. Chloe, we know obviously that going outdoors and spending time in nature makes us feel good, but what does the research tell us about the benefits of time spent in nature and in particular outdoor learning?
Yeah, thank you. It's a very exciting question to answer. And I guess the first thing to say is we're talking about well-being, and everyone kind of, as you say, has an intuitive sense of what well-being means. That's that being happy, having a kind of positive, meaningful life. I guess in the research, people like to get, down into their concepts and categories. And I've got to say that well-being is defined in lots of different ways. But for the purposes of today, I can say without hesitation that being in nature and engaging in outdoor activities is beneficial to the physical, emotional, and social well-being of children and young people. And there's a huge amount of evidence out there which is tapping into different elements of those kind of through broad areas to show that, these kinds of activities are really good for us. They make us feel happy, they make our lives feel meaningful, and they make us healthy, both mentally and physically. So that's really good news I'm happy to share with you. So when I say lots of studies, I'm referring to some big kind of academic reviews of the peer-reviewed literature. So there was a recent systematic review of outdoor learning in nature that covered 147 different research projects or studies. And that really helps summarize the evidence base for me and for you all today. And that study was looking at how did those different research projects assess social well-being and educational outcomes and how they were intersecting. And they covered, as you can imagine, a whole range of different kinds of things. But some of the main types of activities were adventure education, then also curricular lessons outdoors. So when teachers are taking their kids and using, the natural environments to support or just be the setting for their lessons. And then also the lovely garden programs, which we're going to hear more about, which Landcare so wonderfully supports. And essentially across all of these many different kinds of activities, and those aren't the only kinds, there's evidence of improvement across a lot of different areas that, cover physical, emotional, and social well-being. And I've listed some of those things on the slide. So, for example, taking part in a school gardening project can lead to things like improved nutritional attitudes. I've seen that with my son, who's just started taking part in a lovely kitchen garden program here. He's coming home with parsley and dragon fruit, so he's very excited about trying new things. There's also, interestingly, evidence of improved performance in those educational outcomes like maths, languages, and science from going however often into the school garden and taking part in projects there. And then, of course, there's those kind of social and self-esteem, self-efficacy things like a feeling of self-confidence and agency and independence to kind of lead projects or programs within the school gardens. So that's just a little snippet into one facet of how outdoor learning can be really beneficial. And I guess something that I'd highlight from looking at that literature is often these are group activities. I mean, school is a collective setting, and the kind of dynamics within groups that facilitators and educators help create is obviously really vital for the wellbeing outcomes. And I think over the course of today, we'll talk a bit more about how that can play out. Kind of more broadly, in terms of just engaging with nature, maybe outside of structured learning, there's also a huge amount of evidence that this can improve children's and adults' wellbeing in all kinds of ways, which I thought was kind of interesting to pull out, because we could think about this as educators doing particular programs, but we can also think about how do we instill a love of nature and a willingness to get out and be green, and how that can also improve wellbeing. So even just living near green spaces is associated with greater physical activity for kids, and obviously that has all these knock-on health benefits. And it can also lead to more outdoor play, which is also great for kids' wellbeing. And I guess to note the corollary of, a lot of screen time and being indoors has that opposite effect. Experience of green environments also is associated with greater environmental knowledge. And that can then also lead to something I'll talk a bit more about, connection to the environment and becoming custodians of place. Just playing again, play is a key theme. It can improve these physical motor fitness, all the things that lead to good health. And then finally, we know that these things can have these psychosocial benefits. So playing together or being involved in conservation or other kinds of actions that are protecting or caring for place have these really important, not only for the place themselves, benefits, but benefits for the people doing that care. But finally, and I guess this relates to the environmental knowledge, spending time in natural environments as a child is associated with adult pro-environmental attitudes and feelings of being connected with the natural world. And this is really important in the times we live in, as I kind of noted in my introduction, in times of kind of ecological crisis and climate change. We want to raise people who love the earth and will eventually protect it, or will start protecting it as children. And so some of the experiences that we know encourage that kind of connection, again, like this multi-sensory immersion and exploration that's tied to child-led play is really wonderful for building connection. Seeing and learning from caretakers who provide a sense of security and promote the interest and attention of children in the living world, and having an empathy and respect for living things. And we'll definitely hear about that in terms of some creepy crawlies later on. Feeling really confident outdoors, and a sense of oneness with nature. So that dividing that idea of nature is something out there that we might, not really want to know about. It's different to us, but no, we are nature. And often people feel really connected to nature when it is a refuge from stress as well. So in terms of the wellbeing benefits of garden programs and other school-based things, you hear kind of a lot of anecdotal and also research evidence of kids finding refuge there from what might be stressful home or peer situations, and being able to go to those places to be safe. And I just want to kind of flag that there is this other element of connection to nature that I want to pick up again later on in the webinar. But as we become more connected to nature, and as we gain so much well-being from all the things that I've described already, it's also important to acknowledge that we tend to care more about the natural world. And as I said, that's a wonderful thing, because we become custodians of place, and we work to make the world more green, more just for all living beings. But it also means that we're aware of the threats facing the natural world, like biodiversity loss and climate change. And so I think that's something that it's important we're all aware of in our work engaging with kids. And I'll talk a bit more about that later on. So thank you for listening. I think I'll pass back on to Trish.
Thanks so much, Chloe. That's that's hugely interesting. Yeah, absolutely fantastic to hear. There've been a couple of people in the Q&A box wondering how they might be able to find that systematic review study that you mentioned. So I don't know if you have a link to that, or if there's somewhere we can direct people to.
That to you, Trish, and you could.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we can include that in the email to everyone afterwards. That would be great. Sam, when it comes to supporting and fostering well-being in, outdoor environmental projects, either in early childhood or in a school setting, what have you experienced yourself?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I've worked as a junior Landcare facilitator as well as a teacher across many different settings, from early learning to schools, even high schools as well too. And one thing that really shines out when we're looking at this is how the learners that may otherwise struggle in a classroom, those kids that will benefit from tactile learning, modes of learning, they really gravitate towards this. And it's a great way of engaging all learners, as well as those ones that need a little bit of tactile learning as part of their education. It helps to grow and nurture them as they are growing and nurturing plants, It helps with their ability to make decisions as well too, and their agency, which you touched on before, Chloe, about making decisions. So often when we have a project, we will have the opportunity along the lines for the students to become involved in the project, and ultimately feed into what they want to see as part of the program. It's great for the kids. It's also great for the school or early learning centre as well too, because it provides new experiences, it provides publicity, it provides those hands-on opportunities that I mentioned as well too, and also from an educator point of view, those curriculum links as well too. So to cross not just the biological sciences curriculum, which you can really cover with a lot of these outdoor learning activities, but it's the cross-curricular priorities, for example, maths. It helps to provide a concrete piece of experience for writing, for example. So there's all these cross-curricular links that you can integrate as well too. Today I'll talk about a couple of different projects that we've done recently. The first one on the screen now is a herb garden. It was called Community Herbs. It was funded last year in 2023 on one of the Woolworths Junior Landcare grants. And the benefit of the Community Herbs was that we were able to have this herb garden at the front of the school, which was a little bit of a sterile area. And the idea is that the students are growing the herbs not just for themselves in the school for any kitchen garden type activities, but for the whole community. So at pick up and drop off time, if anybody needed some herbs in their cooking, just grab a bunch and take it with you. So the students were involved in planning this, were involved in planning it out. Students with a couple of additional learning needs helped to maintain and water it as well too. So that was their area of responsibility. They were given a responsibility role with this. Other students designed posters and newsletter articles to publicise what was happening with that one as well too. So we really enjoyed the Community Herbs, and actually looking forward to hopefully applying for another Woolworths Junior Landcare grant, because that photo, it's a lovely photo, was looking at its best when we took that right at the end of the project at the end of last year. Now it needs a little bit of work as well too. So again, that maintaining it and what are we going to next brings the students along. We're hearing that student voice, that student agency is coming through as well too. The next one was our Welcoming Wildflowers. And Welcoming Wildflowers was a project that was aimed to increase biodiversity in our school by using Indigenous native wildflowers. So these Indigenous flowers were sourced locally. We've planted over 300 in this particular space. Again, we got feedback from the students about what they wanted to see grow. They planned it, they helped conduct teaching and learning opportunities for the younger students so that everything did get planted the right way up. Anybody who's been involved in a planting day will know the benefits of having some helpful trained kids, bringing the younger kids along as well too. Water them in and mulching as well too. And so with the Welcoming Wildflowers, we're able to then use it for monitoring. So if we just got that next slide there, Trish, able to use it for monitoring and use it as part of their biological science curriculum as well. And we are also able to use it. We're studying biological sciences this term as part of our sciences sustainability. And so we're actually using it as a teaching area where, because it's attracting all of these bugs and butterflies, the idea was going to be, I skipped over that, it was going to be a pollinator garden for all of our local invertebrates to have a stopover, drink some nectar, lay their eggs on some of the plants. But now actually able to use it as an outdoor teaching space as well too. And it's in a way also turned into a little bit of a de facto butterfly garden as well too, because of course butterflies are pollinators. There's all these lovely wildflowers producing a lot of nectar, and all these butterflies are coming in now. So it's a great space to be around, seeing all these insects going about their business as well too. And it's really made that side of the school look really quite spectacular as you drive past as well too.
That's fantastic, Sam. Thanks for sharing. They certainly sound like amazing projects. And also great with the community herb garden, how you engage the wider community as well as the students in school to have that, build those connections.
And that was part of from the outset was what we wanted to achieve. That it was not just a project for within the school. They were trying to broaden ourselves out to the community as well too. So we're providing something for the community and making that broader connection with the community as well.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. So if you're an educator, working in early childhood or a school space, or a Landcare coordinator, possibly working with a group who wants to embark on a project where you see those well-being and social benefits as well as environmental, what are some things that you think they should consider first up?
Think about the space that you have, and what you want to achieve in that space. Every site has limitations, and it needs to respond to your climate and how your climate will change throughout the year as well too. It's great to get feedback from the local Landcare group. It's great to get feedback from the local friends group as well too about what works as well in that space, because I know from our perspective, we've worked with a local Landcare group and a junior Landcare facilitator as well too, which has been fantastic to have them come into the school, and it helps to show the students that they're part of something bigger, part of something outside of the school as well too. Basing your project around SMART goals is really helpful. SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time constrained. So you are able to plan it out from start to finish, and hopefully you'll know where your end point is going to be and what you're going to achieve through that. Getting support is so important, because as a classroom teacher, we're rather busy, and any teachers on this will know. We could be doing science one lesson or maths the next, literacy another time. And so there's a lot going on in any classroom, and getting support from the local Landcare group or friends group or junior Landcare facilitator, or indeed other teachers and leadership in the school, is really helpful as well too. For example, the community, I'm only at my school one day a week. So the community herbs, was taken on by another teacher who's full-time, and they were able to get the kids planting. Another teacher helps to get the kids with the watering, make sure that they're sticking to their roster as well too. So having that support and not being isolated as the sole person in charge of a project is really helpful as well too, especially when it comes time to acquit that grant as well too, or if there is any underfunding to be accountable for that as well too. Thinking about the longevity of a project is really important as well too. For example, our Welcoming Wildflowers is looking great at the moment, but we need to think about what will happen in 6 to 12 months' time, whether we need to infill some of the plants when they get to the end of their life, how these things will be used over time as well. So, for example, our herb garden doesn't look as great as what it did in that earlier picture, so that's our time now to think about what we're going to be doing next. And also making sure that you've got your leadership, your school council on board as well too. Sometimes over time, a project will start and will change. For example, there's a school that I worked at once where there was a lovely little wild play area that was provided by the Landcare network, and kids really enjoyed it because it was overgrown, and it was quite wonderful because they'd made these little paths and tunnels through there. But from a safety perspective, it didn't work as well as what the principal would have liked. So we had to make a few changes and trying to keep as much of the wonderful parts of it as we could, but also make a few changes so it actually was compliant as well too. So there's a few little constraints that we need to, I guess, be aware of, but every constraint is just an opportunity to find another way to achieve what we're going to be looking for as well too. Funding is first and foremost usually the thing that we are all going, or how this is a great idea, how are we going to do it? Grants are an amazing thing. I know that the Woolworths Junior Landcare grant is open at the moment, and we'll probably, definitely be applying again to do something along with our community herbs to try and bring that again up to where we want it to be. So they're open until the 15th of March, and they provide for $1,000 for these sort of projects. And I encouraged everyone to apply because it's a very easy process to apply and to do the acquittal as well too. I actually got the kids to sit around the computer with us, and they helped to type it all. So again, that's the students being involved in a bigger, broader decision-making process. They're typing in the report about what they used the money for and how they spent the money and what they actually got from spending that money.
Great, thanks, Sam. And what types of projects? Could you talk us through just a few of the different types of projects that would be suitable?
Yeah, I really like, from like looking at things from a well-being perspective, I'm also trying, I guess, to find ways to link it to my teaching as well too, when I'm teaching biology, or looking at ways that I can integrate into writing or maths and that kind of thing as well too. There's a couple that I was thinking for this one would be really quite nice. The first one is a butterfly garden. Our welcoming wildflowers almost turned into a de facto butterfly garden, as I mentioned before, due to all the flowers. And it's great to have a butterfly garden because it's something that can be done all around Australia. We've got butterflies, different species, but we've got butterflies all around Australia. And butterflies in their adult form, they drink nectar, they eat nectar, that's what they need. So one of the main things in a butterfly garden is having some nice flowers that are suitable, such as these. This is a type of buddleia. There's many different types of butterfly suitable flowers out there. This is just from my garden here at home. But they provide a lot of nectar. There's lots of little flowers, lots of opportunities for the butterflies to get a drink. And so lots of a display that will keep flowering throughout the year. You might have different plants flowering at different times. That's there we go. We're involving the children in research. We're looking at seasons. We're looking at the sustainability of our garden, sustainability of our butterfly life cycle as well too, because you're attracting the adult butterflies. I also like to be able to try and attract the butterflies to lay their eggs, and I've got a bit of host plant here. And I've got an orchard swallowtail caterpillar here. That's one of the larger caterpillars. Interesting enough, just an odd fact, I had to share it. This is where is it? About to fall off the leaf. There we go. That's one of the juvenile caterpillars. They do change as they grow. And I find this fascinating because when they're younger, like this one is here, they look like bird poo. So they try and defend themselves by looking like bird poo. And having these sort of things and having these opportunities to look at things and study things and bring caterpillars into the classroom is that amazing, authentic experience for the students. They can see things, and you're also saving money on buying, wildlife kits and that sort of stuff because you're actually doing it at the school yourself. Next one would be a sensory garden. The idea of a sensory garden is as you move through the space, you are engaging all senses. So it might be your sense of hearing as you're walking through along some crunchy gravel, the different textures of the wood, the leaves of the plants, and engages touch. There's smell, for example, that you might have some particularly fragrant type flowers, and additionally you'll probably attract a lot of butterflies and everything like that to a sensory garden as well too, as well as having some things such as the herbs like mint, for example, that when the students touch it, they're able to smell it, they're able to feel it. It's interesting, Trish, the community herbs garden that turned into a little bit of a sensory garden in many ways too, because as the kids left the school at the end of the day, often you'd see them just grab a bit of mint and just smell this, and they share it with their friends as well too. So it's a little bit of an opportunity for them to engage in that space, and that was really nice to see that when the kids did that. The final thing would be a food garden, and a food garden, it doesn't have to be enormous. Our community herbs also had some spring onions in there. as well as a few other things as well, some beans and that kind of thing as well. It doesn't have to be huge, but it was a great opportunity for the students to grow some produce. They used it in a cooking class. They also took a little bit of it home with them as well too. And I know with my kids that when they were at their kinder and they grew food, and then when we did the same thing here in the garden, they'd actually eat things that they wouldn't otherwise touch. So, and I think you mentioned it before as well too, Chloe, about nutrition as well, that it gives them the opportunity to try new things. And because they have that sense of ownership over it, because they grew it themselves, they the first reaction to it isn't, oh yuck, I'm not going to eat that. They're actually keen to try it. All of these projects, we've got them on the Junior Landcare Learning Centre. And sorry, Trish, I should have mentioned as well too, thanks to the support from Woolworths, the Junior Landcare Learning Centre is packed with all of these activities, and they range from biodiversity, First Nations perspective, waste management and food production. But if you click into the activities, we basically work around a 30-minute activity. They've got step-by-step instructions. There's some videos that will explain why the learning why the learning activity is important and the important things you'll need before you get started. There's some educator notes in there as well too. And the Junior Landcare, Woolworths Junior Landcare grants are open at the moment.
Thanks, Sam. And yeah, in the email that we send out to everyone who's registered after this, we'll be sure to include links to those learning activities that you mentioned for the butterfly garden, sensory garden and food garden. They all are supported by curriculum links or early framework links as well. So Chloe, Sam has spoken about obviously his experiences on working on projects like these and what he's seen, how he's seen the children benefit. I know your research has been more focused around supporting children who've dealt with climate-related natural disasters and climate-related anxiety. Could you talk to us a bit about that research and what you've learned through that?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned in my introduction, I'm a kind of unique kind of researcher. I'm very across the kind of broader research literature, but I really bring, and my team bring, a kind of lens of art and creativity to the research process. And so we've used those methods for engaging and exchanging with children and families to talk about how they feel both in nature and about nature. So these perspective shifts, like there's the well-being benefits of time in nature, which I've already spoken about and which everything Sam has said is so clearly supporting. But then there's also, as I started to mention, these more distressing kind of both local and global changes to the environment, as well as kind of loss and damage as a result of extreme weather events. So I'm sure many people in the webinar today have already experienced something like a fire, flood, cyclone or heat wave. Even this summer alone, we've seen so many across Australia, and the science tells us that these are going to become more intense and frequent as a result of human-induced climate change. And we've experienced these things, and kids do too. They're aware, they're being directly affected. They're also being exposed to kind of a broader knowledge about these events and their causes, whether it's through school, social media, friendship groups and family. Our kids are aware, and certainly as the older they get, more kind of concerning I think this becomes to them. It's understandably just distressing. Not only there are these kind of traumas as a result of losing a home or a loved one, but also the awareness that they are going to be more frequent and intense carries its own very valid source of distress. And so as I said, I'm a niche kind of researcher, so I'm going to talk to some of that broader population research that colleagues of mine are doing. So we do know, for example, there was a recent global survey of over 10,000 young people, and they found that 80% were worried about climate change. And for many, their worries were affecting their daily lives and functioning. And closer to home, we're kind of seeing similar results in Australia, specific surveys. Young people are worried, and they often feel that they're not heard or supported by older generations, and also by governments who are failing to act by kind of stemming some of those root causes of climate change, like continued extraction of fossil fuels. So I should say as a caveat that a lot of these surveys are with adolescents, so over the age of 12. And that's a very strong evidence base now, I would say. But there is also emerging evidence showing that even primary school kids are feeling worried and concerned. So, for example, I collaborate with a group in Tasmania called Curious Climate Schools, where kids can ask any questions they want about climate change, and then they're answered by the right expert who can answer the question. So it's very much like a child-led kind of climate and science communication project. And one of the most common questions, or very common question asked across the age group from primary to secondary was, is it too late? So that kind of gives a sense of those future-focused worries, like what is my life going to look like? So that's the doom and gloom part. But the, I guess, part that I really want to lean into, and that I think as environmental educators and people who care about place, we can support young people to acknowledge some of these really kind of big feelings about what's going on in the world, but also have that grounded in why. Like, it's because we care. It's because we care about the natural world, because we love, you know, what we do know of nature. And, you know, emotions are complex and messy. So we might be worried as well as really, you know, motivated and passionate. And I'll talk a bit more about that with a helpful resource that you might like to take away. And coming back to me and the kind of processes that our team use, we've been playing around with different visual art-based processes that we can use with families, with kids, to acknowledge these complex feelings. And one of them is a process called body mapping, and which some of you might know because it's kind of used in a lot of different ways, often in education, also in kind of community development and health promotion. Our team uses it more in research, and my wonderful director of our team, Catherine Boydell, has written a book about that, body mapping and research. But we used it for the first time, as we know, in research to explore how kids and their parents were feeling about nature and about what's going on in nature. And you can just see here little kind of tasters of how people responded. So on the right, this was actually more kind of a drop-in event that we held in our local council area. And one young girl began to place these rocks on her head to show how heavy she was feeling with thoughts about the natural world. But then we also noticed there's flowers she's placed around it, and there's lichen on the rocks. And so there's kind of something growing and still, you know, symbiotic, the lichen that's going over these seemingly kind of dead, inert, heavy objects that are the rocks. And so that's just kind of one little story and insight into how we can kind of reframe and have conversations around these complex emotions. It's a bit harder to see, but the hand on the left is by a little 7-year-old boy in a workshop with his mum. And we invited them to think about, on the inside of the hand, some of those positive things in nature. So he's written happy birds, feeling clay. And then also what some of the things that he might be worried about on the outside. So he's written climate change, animals, homes broken, and tree cutting. And so this wasn't led by us. This was just, we created these open spaces where kids could voice how they were feeling, and parents too, in a really safe, supported way in an outdoor setting, which was amazing. So if we can go to the next slide. So yeah, just a bit more about body mapping and how we did it was kind of, we used natural materials from the local area. And I guess, so it's something that you might like to consider in your own teaching or facilitation, but something I'd like to say is that just thinking really sensitively about how you gather materials. And for me, that involved talking to a local elder and thinking about how to gather respectfully on Gadigal and Bidjigal land. And one of the things that that elder said was just don't break a stick, don't break a tree. So when gathering, being really sensitive about what you're moving, and I think conveying that to kids as well when you're using natural materials to make, and returning things to where they came from as possible, where possible. So the process that we used was ephemeral, and we traced outlines of the body and then had conversations about how you might represent feelings using a range of different materials. And then at the end, the kids helped and the families helped pack away as well. So it was kind of like a closure to the process. And then the chance for new families or new children to take part and recycle those materials. It was quite a collective thing. So you can see here, this is a mother and daughter doing it together, but it was nice. We also played around with overlapping bodies so that people could feel like they're, you know, in a community. And that's something that we know in terms of well-being and mental health in this context is not feeling alone and isolated in your thoughts and feelings. And particularly when it comes to these like really, you know, insurmountable global challenges that we're doing things together. And that's why those projects where you're, you know, improving biodiversity in your garden by inviting invertebrates in, these are things that you can feel connected with school and people outside your school to make a difference and to feel really good about that, to feel like you're not alone. So I might go to the next slide now, Trish. So I guess just to encourage you to think about your role as educators, you might be in places where there have been direct impacts, or might just be in places where you know that kids are aware of or talking about some of their concerns. And one of the most important things that young people want is to feel heard and that their worries aren't minimized, but also to build kind of a realistic and active hope. So sure, it's really important to acknowledge some of these red, purple and green feelings that people might be feeling, but also to remember that there's that blue there. There's hope and gratitude and empathy, inspiration, empowerment, and interest in all the amazing things that the natural world has to offer. So as educators, in whatever spaces you're planning or already have that whole beauty and plants and animals, how can you offer a chance for people to feel safe to come to you with these feelings? And then how can you help them, you know, build towards those blue emotions on this helpful wheel, which we'll be sending around in a follow-up email, but you can also maybe scan the QR code that was developed by a Finnish researcher. So yeah, we all have an important role to play in listening and inspiring kids so that they feel less alone. And I think the examples that Sam have shown earlier are really powerful ways of doing this as well. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you, Chloe. That's such interesting research, and the body mapping exercise really sounds fantastic. I'm sure that's something that a lot of educators would benefit from. Just having a look through the questions. We've got just over 15 minutes left, so obviously I want to get through as many as we can. So if anyone else watching has any questions for Chloe and Sam, please feel free to pop them in the Q&A box, and I'll have a look through it. First of all, Chloe, this is probably one for you. Do you know of any research from Belinda? Do you know of any research about children with disabilities learning in outdoor play spaces, specifically about learning functional skills?
It's something that is becoming, like, I'm aware of. So I've begun to have a look at kind of green care and some of those models more for kind of transition and adult age populations. Rather, I haven't fully gone into depth in the younger age groups at school age levels. But I guess as a tangent and a subtle plug, I've been working on a collaboration with an adult art group. So a studio that supports artists with intellectual disability, and we're working on a project looking at care for place, and we collaborated with a group of neurodivergent bush care workers. And so I guess in that context, in that project with an adult population, what we've found is just that, again, that sense of agency, skills building, and like challenging stereotypes of care for people with disability has been some of the really key things that both our artistic response and the bush care workers themselves were experiencing in their role. And I guess this is in the form of kind of a supported employment context as opposed to the schoolyard.
And I can add to that as well too, Trish. I see it across our learners at school as well too. We've got every place has often a range of students there, and I've worked in it's called special development school settings in the gardens there as well too. And I found getting out in the gardens been really helpful for the students and their gross motor skills. So the digging, the lifting, the moving. And being in the garden, I think it's a leveler. And that's what I was getting to. And I was saying that there's a range of different abilities across any educational setting. It's a level in a way that, you know, it doesn't matter who you are, the lettuce still grows as a lettuce will. You know, all it needs is a bit of care and guidance, and the students need a bit of care and guidance, but everybody can grow that lettuce. And it's that sense of achievement that they have done that.
Thanks, Sam. Chloe, if an educator wants to bring the research you're talking about into their classroom, could you kind of give some, I guess, easy steps as to how they could do that?
Yeah, and I've been trying to write up a kind of really accessible resource, which is in the pipeline that hopefully maybe we can even share via Landcare networks. But in the meantime, so that you can have a try, I think the scaffolding of kind of noticing how your body is a place where emotions can be felt. So some kind of mindfulness or body scan at the beginning is really helpful, and you can use something like this climate emotion wheels to talk about how you might represent feelings in the body is another tool. So it'll be like 1, so have the language and the awareness. 2 is the actual how do you do the body mapping, and that is quite simple. You literally take a life-size tracing of, so you can pair kids up and take a tracing of each other, and the way that they position themselves on the paper or fabric is also can be representative of what mood or message they want to share. And then finally, I think always having a kind of awareness of safety and closure too. So being aware that once you start getting to the terrain of emotions like these, things might come up, and maybe being aware of where you can go to for extra support if you need it, and also having a chance at the end for kind of debriefing and reflecting on what has been made and shared, because the art is a catalyst for conversation, and you know, people might not want to, but it can be a really interesting way for especially younger kids when they don't have the words, or they might not have been able to make connections, can start to express themselves. So I guess 3 big broad things with little sub steps, and I watch this space. Hopefully we'll have a really helpful guide coming soon.
That's great, thank you. Maybe this one's for Sam, although Chloe, you probably have some ideas as well, but Georgia asks, what's the best way to introduce a connection to nature with 4 to 5-year-olds?
I think it's actually to get out and explore. Let's go on a little bit of a ramble. It needs to be scaffolded, so it's a matter of going out, explaining that we're going to be looking for animals and how to touch or not touch things safely, and how we're going to be observing, and that we're going to be going to their world, and giving the children an opportunity to, for example, in explaining how we're going to look at the animals. It might be with a magnifying glass, it might just be with our own eyes. We're going to be looking at how the habitat is used by the animals, and getting out and about is a really great way of then being able to make that connection to we can be part and help out the environment as well too. So the next thing leading on from there might be, for example, growing some seeds that will be a flowering plant that then can be planted out in the area where you've looked, and you can make that connection between the animals that you saw, or if you didn't see any, then you can talk about, well, we're planting these because we didn't see any animals, and we would like, for example, a butterfly to come in, or some other pollinators to come in as well too. So that's probably off the top of my head how I would structure that. There's also obviously the ages, the abilities of your children as well too, and how their level of experience being outdoors. Some of the ELCs that I work at, they've got a real broad background because they've been part of a bush kinder program, for example, 1 day a week, and for them being outdoors is second nature. Some other ones, the first time they see a bee, they'll tell me it's dangerous and run and hide. And we then need to talk about, yes, it's a bee and they can sting. However, the bee is only going to sting you if it's trying to protect itself, if it feels worried. So how can we make sure the bee doesn't feel worried? So then we're able to talk about what things make us feel worried and what things might make the bee feel worried. It's interesting, I was doing a bee program last week at quite a few kinders, and that was the first thing the kids were telling me, oh, the bees, they were stinging. But then we had to sort of backtrack and have that conversation about why animals do what they do. So I'm starting to go off track there, Trish. I'm going to stop myself now.
That's all right. Actually, there was a question earlier from Lisa who asked about risk assessment in terms of projects like bees attracting pollinators, especially European honeybees that may cause allergies. So yeah, do you have any kind of experience on that?
It will depend a little bit on the cohort that you have. I've been to places where there's not many flowers around, but still there's bees that'll fly around because the nearby gardens have flowers as well too. So just because you're attracting bees into a school ground doesn't necessarily mean that that's the first time that you'll get bees. Bees can fly 3 kilometers from their hive, and so they're going to go over your school, around your school. I'm using the word school to describe all learning centres here. So if somebody has a bee allergy, they're automatically going to have their allergy plan, the EpiPens, that kind of thing as well too. If you are doing something within the school grounds that are going to attract butterflies, bees, that kind of thing, it's then a matter of understanding where the flight paths are going to be, and it might be to have a chat to your local bee group as well too about where they think or how they think the bees will fly in, because I'm a beekeeper. I can generally look at a garden and say, well, I think the bees are going to fly in that way, so that you're not putting it in a spot where students are going to necessarily be walking past all the time. So you're thinking about any ways that you can mitigate risk if it's a high traffic area, and if you're walking past where the bee is going to be flying in and out of, then maybe it's a matter of like looking at the site and thinking, okay, maybe we'll just put it a little bit further over this way, away from that high traffic area, where you're going to have less risk of that interaction there as well too. So, and then talking about the types of ways that we are interacting in the space as well too, because in a pollinator garden, you're not going to get bees acting defensively or anything like that. You'll only get bees acting defensively if you are holding the bees or touching the bees in that sort of setting.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. It's a question from Janine. Janine, I'd love to know what age group you're talking about here, but she says, as a new garden educator, I find the older children more difficult to encourage to engage in the garden, especially with the interest they develop in technology. So yeah, I guess they've discovered iPads and they're not as excited by playing in the mud anymore. What can you recommend to engage their interest? And actually, Stephen has commented saying microscopes as an engagement tool, which is a great idea. My 8-year-old got a microscope from Santa for Christmas and was ridiculously excited, and started her own little nature journal. But Sam, do you have any ideas around that?
Yeah, for me, involving technology is great because there's some really great little clip-on microscopes that you can put over the camera, the iPad, tablet, computer, all that sort of thing, and it actually lets you really zoom in on the animals. So yeah, the way that I engage my students there is to get them to look at the different features of the pollinators, for example, their proboscis, their legs, their claws, their body, and really zoom in using these viewers and the technology to then create a bit of maybe a field guide, for example, on what you find in your space. That would be how I would look at working with those children, as well as exposing them to being able to look for the bugs itself, and not to catch and keep, but to collect, to examine, and then put back where they've been found as well too. Those older learners, I've found, will then really gravitate towards that activity because they're involved in it, in using the technology that they also enjoy using as well.
Yeah, that's great. What about you, Chloe? Do you have any kind of experience for that with that older age group as well?
Oh, my son's 7, so I would speak from my 7-year-old's experience, that I think it's often like the peer, it's that everyone, it's like there's a critical mass as well. So if he can feel like he's more likely to do it because he's got other friends interested in as well. So if it can become if you can somehow tap into a collective, like a critical mass, or the right person who can lead the way, I feel like that could be a way. But that's totally not research evidence-based. That's just me talking about my 7-year-old. And I think I can imagine it becomes a lot harder, in those older age, as it gets a bit older as well.
Yeah, absolutely. The question here, can the activities that you guys have discussed today be adopted by Landcare groups for adults?
I would think so. The junior Landcare activities are open for all, and I can see a butterfly garden working in so many different spaces, and I know that it'd be a nice little challenge to have a butterfly garden based using solely the indigenous plants as well too. So I think absolutely.
Yeah, and what about you, Chloe?
Yeah, I mean, we've used these different techniques with all kinds of age groups, and I guess one of the things that was really special about the project I mentioned was being parents and kids. And I think in the adult Landcare groups, from conversations I've had, it's, there are these intergenerational settings. So if, having the kids involved and the adults who are, how can you bring everyone in on the weekend to find something that excites them? I think those creative, crafty things can help fill that a little bit.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. There was a question earlier about citizen science in schools. Sam, I don't know if you use any particular platforms or citizen science programs that you'd recommend.
Yeah, I in a past life I was a water watch coordinator, so that was great. And that's getting the students out and monitoring the water and monitoring the water bugs as well too. There's various field guides as well and interactive programs. For example, different frog monitoring programs as well too that are using apps as well. There's the backyard bird count. There's Bug Blitz. And all of those programs are great ways of having the students involved in a real project that is bigger and outside of the school as well too. So wherever possible, it's great to be able to do that because it's contributing to real research and real learning.
Great, thank you. Okay, I think we're almost out of time. Was there anything else, Chloe or Sam, that you wanted to add before we sign off for today? Any key takeaways for people?
I think it's very easy when you're a teacher to stay in the classroom, and if you can get outdoors, it's the kids change.
I guess just I would say, you know, we are nature. That connection to nature, if we can find it anywhere we can. So remember that, and you know, while we've got them young, they still, I feel like it's kind of innate from a very young age, and then we slowly lose that knowledge. So we can keep that knowledge going as they grow up. It's a very worthwhile task.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you both to Zoe, sorry, to Chloe and Sam for your time today. It's been really valuable, and I'm sure everybody really appreciates the insights and knowledge that you shared today. We will be circulating an email to everyone who registered today with a recording to the webinar, and also a professional development certificate. So we'll include in that any links to the learning activities and resources that we mentioned today. We'll also include a link to the Woolworths Junior Landcare Grants page on our website. So if you are interested in applying for a $1,000 grant to help you run a project like one of the ones we discussed today, it's a great opportunity to do so. And they close on the 15th of March. So we'll include that information in the email. Also, if you have any feedback on today's webinar, we'd love to hear it, or any suggestions for topics for future webinars. You can email us at juniorlandcare@landcareaustralia.com.au. So we hope you enjoyed today's session and took something away from it. Thanks again to Chloe and Sam, and thanks to everyone who came along today.
Thanks very much, Trish. Thanks, Chloe.
Thank you.